Horror stories are often just that, stories. We're safe in the knowledge that the latest scares can't get us in the sanctity of our own homes. But what if all of that changed? For some people, an ordinary day can become a walking nightmare in the blink of an eye and leave them feeling like they're living a real-life horror story. 20-year-old Angela Marie Hammond of Kansas City, Missouri, was a popular and bright young woman. Those who knew Angela described her as kind and caring, and by 1991, the 20-year-old had gotten engaged to her high school sweetheart, Rob Schaefer, and the two had just found out that they were expecting their first child. Angela and Rob were excited to become parents, and they began making preparations. When not studying at the Central State University, Angela could be found working at a local bank. Everything for the newly engaged couple was perfect. That was until April of 1991, when their lives would turn into a real-life horror story. On April 4th, 1991, Angela and Rob attended a family barbecue and left at around 10 p.m. as Rob had to babysit his younger brother. The couple decided to meet up later that evening, and as Angela drove away, Rob had no idea that it would be the last time he would ever see his fiancée. For the rest of the evening, Angela drove around town with her friend, and the two chatted about Angela's plans for becoming a mother. Eventually, the friend called it a night, and Angela made her way to a nearby payphone to call Rob. At around 11:15 p.m., Rob received a call at his parents' home from Angela, telling him that he was going straight home as he was tired. The young couple chatted for a few minutes when all of a sudden, their conversation was broken up by Angela's screams before the line went silent. Just moments before this, Angela had told Rob that a bizarre man had been circling the car park close to where the payphone was. After the line went silent, Rob rushed out of his parents' home and jumped into his car. He immediately drove as fast as he could to Angela's location, but it was too late. As he rounded the corner, he saw a 1960s or 70s two-tone Ford pickup truck with a water decal on the side speed by him. Faint shouts and cries were emanating from the truck, and Rob knew Angela was inside. Unfortunately, Rob's car broke down mid-chase, and the strange man managed to escape. Multiple witnesses came forward claiming to have seen the man in the area the night that Angela disappeared, but nobody was able to name him, with the man being described as a filthy white man with glasses, a beard, and a mustache. Hundreds upon thousands of man-hours have been spent investigating Angela's case, but none of the leads have ever panned out. To this day, the Clinton Police Department still receives new leads and tips, and in 2021 they received new information that may help solve the case. Anyone with additional information is asked to contact Detective Damon Parsons of the Clinton Police Department at 660-885-5561, quoting case number 910488. 29-year-old Claudia Kirschhock had recently gotten her dream job as a travel writer, which saw her traveling to resorts and attractions around the world and reporting on them. By the year 2000, Claudia was stable and happy in her career. So when she received a call to take a last-minute trip to Havana, Cuba for work, she accepted. Little did Claudia or her family know that this was a last-minute work trip that would lead them down the rabbit hole of one of the most bizarre missing person cases ever. On May 24, 2000, Claudia and her coworker, Tanya Grosinger, arrived in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Their excitement quickly fizzled out when they were informed that their work assignment to Cuba had been canceled. To make the situation even worse, all of the flights from Jamaica back to the US were full, meaning the girls were stuck on the island for a few days. Instead of letting this get them down, Claudia and Tanya decided to make the most of their stay, and thankfully, their employers had found somewhere for them to stay at the Sandals Resort. The two spent the following days together, and Claudia even caught the attention of Anthony Grant, a bartender at the resort. Claudia and Anthony spent time together when he was off the clock, and on May 27th, Tanya was able to get a flight home. Claudia's flight wasn't for a few more days, and she assured Tanya that she would be fine alone. That was the last time that Tanya ever saw or heard from Claudia again. On June 2nd, 2000, Claudia failed to show up to work back in New York, and that's when her friends and family knew something was very wrong. Her parents immediately contacted the Jamaican police and the resort where Claudia had been staying. The maids searched the room that Claudia had been staying in and found that her bed had not been slept in for several days, and that all of her belongings, aside from a swimming costume, were in the room. Her passport and wallet were still in the room, meaning she'd not boarded her flight back to New York. The investigation into Claudia's disappearance was bungled from the start. The room that she had been staying in was quickly cleaned out and rented to other guests, effectively destroying any forensic evidence that may have been left behind. Her personal items began to disappear or were misplaced by the local authorities, and her parents were incredibly vocal about the mismanagement of their daughter's case. In the days after May 27th, the last day that Claudia was seen, Anthony Grant had phoned in sick to work, and when a forensic examination was undertaken at his home, the police found evidence to suggest that Claudia had been there. Sniffer dogs also tracked Claudia's scent to Anthony's house, and alerted to her scent being present on items in his home, such as boots and gloves. Without further conclusive evidence, Anthony Grant could not be charged, and Claudia's case remains cold to this day. Over the years, vital pieces of information and evidence have disappeared, and some people believe that the Jamaican police are covering up the truth about what happened to Claudia. 38-year-old Patricia "Patty" Mian was also known to be a happy-go-lucky woman with a free spirit and a big heart. But by April of 1989, that had all changed. Patricia's friends and family noticed that the once happy and outgoing Patty had become erratic and withdrawn. Her behavior had massively shifted, and she'd scheduled an appointment to see a psychiatrist on April 21st, 1989. The day before Patty was due to meet the psychiatrist, she would be involved in a car crash that would ultimately lead to her bizarre disappearance. At the time of her disappearance, Patty was living in Bozeman, Montana, working as a ranch hand and also picking up odd jobs to make ends meet. While working as a ranch hand isn't what Patty had always dreamed of doing, she made her situation work, and she'd recently asked her parents if she could move back home to Pittsburgh to be with them. On April 20th, Patty left her home in Bozeman, Montana, hopping in her Chevy Nova and hitting the road with the destination unknown. At 8:15 p.m. on Highway 200, near Circle, Montana, over 300 miles from Bozeman, Patty lost control of her car as she'd been driving down the wrong side of the road. Patty's car made contact with an off-duty police officer and narrowly missed another. When the three women got out of their cars to assess the damage and to ensure that everyone was all right, two of them noticed something bizarre. The off-duty police officer and the other driver would later report that Patty appeared to be in a daze. She stood and stared at the two women that she had narrowly missed for a few seconds before turning around and walking into a field. That was the last time Patty was ever seen or heard from again. And in the years since her disappearance, there have been over 100 supposed sightings of her. The two women immediately reported the incident to the local police, who were quickly able to discover that the crashed car belonged to Patty. A search was put together and officers began combing the surrounding woods and forests, looking for any sign of her. Despite multiple search efforts, no sign of Patty has ever been found, and she remains missing to this day. There are numerous reports of Patty being seen at truck stops in Montana and Seattle, but investigators have never been able to confirm the validity of these sightings. Anyone with information is asked to contact Dave Harris of the Macomb County Sheriff's Office at 406-485-3405, quoting case number 894201. Oliver Wendell Munson was a well-liked teacher at Ellicott City Middle School in Maryland. He was known to take his students bowling twice a week, and his approach to teaching kept his students focused and engrossed. Those who knew Oliver described him as kind and gentle with an easygoing nature. He had no enemies and was well-liked by everyone who knew him, so why did he mysteriously disappear? Just days after Oliver disappeared, he was due to testify against Dennis Watson, and investigators believed that the two events may be connected. In 1983, Oliver had unknowingly bought a stolen car from Dennis Watson, and when he found out, Oliver knew that he had to do something about it. After speaking to the authorities, Oliver had agreed to testify against Dennis in court, but that would never happen. On February 13, 1984, Oliver left his home in Catonsville, Maryland, and headed for work. Like he did every morning, only this time, Oliver would never make it to work. When he failed to show up, the school's administration knew that something was wrong, and they immediately contacted his family. When Oliver still hadn't made contact with anyone by Valentine's Day of 1984, his family reported him missing to the Baltimore County Police Department, and the search for Oliver began. Just days after Oliver disappeared, his 1980 Ford Pinto was found abandoned a short distance from his home with a flat tire. There was no indication of a struggle or what had happened to him. Weeks later, 2 receipts from a video store were found in a stolen car that had Oliver's name on them. These were found in West Baltimore. According to reports, forensic evidence was found on and around these receipts. However, the DNA evidence is now too degraded to perform analysis upon. Dennis Watson, the man Oliver was due to testify against, denied being involved in Oliver's disappearance, and his case has sat cold since 1980. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Dominique Bridges of the Baltimore County Police Department at 410-887-2214, quoting case number 01E100946. 18-year-old Diana Brungard was in her final year of high school in Festus, Missouri, and couldn't wait to see what the future held for her. When not working hard towards her final exams, Diana worked part-time at the Venture store in the Twin City Mall and was well-liked by her coworkers and customers. On March 11, 1987, as soon as the clock struck 10, Diana grabbed her clocking out card, punched it through the machine, and headed towards her bright yellow 1982 Ford Escort. The drive from the mall to her home should have taken her a few minutes, but when 10:30 p.m. came around and there was no sign of Diana, her parents knew something was very wrong. Diana's parents immediately began calling her workplace and her friends, hoping that they held the answers to the whereabouts of their daughter. As more and more names were ticked off the list, the Brungards realized that nobody had seen Diana, and they called the Crystal City Police Department to officially report her missing. Within hours, the police arrived at the Brungard home and began interviewing her parents. Diana and her brother had been adopted at birth, and at first, the police thought Diana had run away to try to find her birth mother. Hours later, Diana's bright yellow 1982 Ford Escort was found abandoned in the mall's parking lot. Nothing of note was missing from the car, and there was no sign of a struggle. Days later, a witness came forward and told the Crystal City Police Department that they had seen Diana talking to a man in the parking lot on the day that she disappeared. The witness described the man as white, aged 35 to 40, with dark hair and 5'10". Many years later, a man fitting this description was tracked down, but investigators were unable to find any new information from him. Unfortunately, Diana's case quickly went cold, and it's remained that way for many decades now. There are very few leads in Diana's case, and her family hopes that she is still out there somewhere. Investigators believe that Diana met with foul play, but they're unable to determine where, how, or when. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Charles Womble of the Crystal City Police Department at 636-937-4601, quoting case number 210F80. For more than a month, the family and friends of Matthew Dillon have been searching for answers after he disappeared without a trace on January 2nd, 2023. The search for their missing loved one took a strange turn when the last known CCTV images of him showed up in York, 100 miles away from his home in South Liverpool. Matthew was 46 years old when he disappeared. He was last seen leaving his home in Mosley Hill, Liverpool, where he lived with his father. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary about Matthew that morning, and when his father asked about his plans for the day, he simply said that it was a nice day and he might go to Southport, a journey that would have been about 90 minutes on public transport. Later that day, he sent his father a message on WhatsApp, letting him know that he would be home at about 10:30 p.m. if his bus arrived on time. His father replied saying, "Take care." The final message was marked as read at 10:29 p.m. By that point, Matthew should have almost been home, but another 20 minutes passed by and there was still no sign of him. His father sent a follow-up message at 10:50 p.m., but the message remained undelivered. Either Matthew had switched his phone off or he didn't have internet access. When Matthew didn't return home that night, his family reported him missing to the local police. A search began in the Liverpool and Southport area, with public appeals for information on social media shortly thereafter. There was no sign of Matthew in either of these two areas, but police began to get reports from York. A number of witnesses reported seeing Matthew in a pub in York. Matthew had visited York pubs in the past, and it wouldn't have been too unusual of a trip to make. But it was very out of character for Matthew to make the trip without telling anyone. If Matthew had visited Southport, the journey to York on public transport would have taken over 3 hours and meant traveling back through Liverpool. Matthew was spotted on January 3rd and 4th, but didn't seem to be acting strangely. The last known sighting of Matthew took place on the morning of January 5th. He was spotted on CCTV footage at York train station, still wearing the clothes he'd been wearing when he left his home in Liverpool 3 days earlier. Matthew is described as white, of a large build with short sandy hair, and wears glasses. He was wearing a blue jacket, a dark-colored beanie, and a messenger bag when he vanished. Anyone with information in the case should contact North Yorkshire Police at 101. On the evening of December 28, 2022, Peter Baglan got up off the sofa and told his wife he was going for a walk. He said he would be home soon, but over a month later, he still hasn't been seen. Peter was 55 years old when he disappeared. He'd been married to Michelle for over 20 years and had her name tattooed on his neck. The couple had 4 grandchildren together and had recently welcomed their first great-grandchild. According to Michelle, there didn't seem to be anything unusual going on in the build-up to Peter's disappearance. And when he left that evening, she couldn't have expected him to never return. The couple lived in Greater Manchester, and it wasn't unusual for Peter to go walking along the canal towpath, listening to music. At 7:38 p.m., Peter was caught on CCTV at the Texaco garage in Mosley Common, where he bought a bottle of whiskey. About 35 minutes later, Michelle called him to check in on him. Peter told her he was going for a walk along the Bridgewater Canal, and he needed to clear his head. What he might have needed to clear his head from hasn't been made public. According to Michelle, she was worried about him, but he told her that he would be home soon. His last words to her were, "I love you, you're my world." When Peter didn't come home, Michelle tried calling but never received an answer. She eventually reported him as a missing person. The first sign of Peter was found the following day. On the canal towpath, his phone, hat, and earphones were discovered. It was an odd collection of belongings, but it seemed possible Peter might have fallen into the canal. Police underwater search teams went through the entire stretch of the canal. More than 200 people joined in the search for Peter, but no other clues turned up. If Peter had fallen into the canal, it seems strange no other items he had been carrying were ever discovered. Peter's family believes someone knows where he is or what happened to him. Anybody with information on the case should contact the Greater Manchester Police on 101 or Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Peter is described as 5 foot 10 inches with gray hair and a tattoo on the left side of his neck. Jessica Zarinsky was spotted on multiple CCTV cameras after her disappearance, but the sightings haven't led to the police or her family getting any closer to closing her missing person case. Jessica disappeared on the evening of November 25th, 2022. She was 30 years old at the time, and even though she suffered from health problems, it wasn't immediately clear to her family that anything was wrong. Days passed and nobody was able to get a hold of Jessica. At that point, her family reported her missing to the police. The missing person report was filed on December 3rd, and police began a public appeal for information. The last known sighting of Jessica had been at about 10 p.m. in the Bosley Park area of Sydney, Australia. According to the missing person report, she was last seen wearing a yellow long-sleeved shirt, black leggings, and flat shoes. Police also shared a CCTV image of Jessica captured earlier that day, where she was wearing a gray top. As part of the investigation into this missing person case, police went through CCTV footage from the surrounding area. 3 days after she was last seen by family and friends, CCTV footage captured Jessica walking in a suburban area of Bosley Park. Now she was wearing an orange sleeveless shirt along with black leggings. She was spotted on Zandro Avenue at about 8:35 p.m. on November 28th, then outside a club on Prairievale Road at 9:45 p.m. She was then seen walking in the opposite direction 5 minutes later. A short clip of the last known sighting of Jessica was released to the public. She walks confidently across a road carrying a cream-colored handbag she hadn't been carrying when friends last saw her 3 days earlier. The strange CCTV footage only made police more concerned about Jessica's safety. No other footage in the 2 months since Jessica vanished has been located. Jessica has had mental health problems in the past, and erratic behavior wasn't uncommon for her. But according to her family, she had never completely disappeared before. Jessica is described as being 5 foot 5 inches tall, with a thin build and long hair. She has tattoos on her right index finger, left wrist, and the back of her neck. Anybody with information should contact Fairfield Police or Crime Stoppers on 1-800-333-000. When Edward Donnelly went missing from the village of Sacriston in County Durham, police were sure that someone in the community knew what had happened to him. More than 20 years on, the missing person case remains unsolved. Edward was last seen on March 25, 2002. He was 53 years old at the time and lived with his sister Frances in the small village. He was a quiet, unassuming man who didn't have any known issues with anybody. In such a small community, any problems he would have been common knowledge. Edward had once been a miner but had since left the job and spent his time walking, reading books, and watching television. On the afternoon of March 25th, his sister came home to an empty house and a small collection of Edward's personal belongings just inside the front door. His keys, checkbook, and other documents had been posted through the letterbox. Frances found that strange and she couldn't get a hold of her brother. She contacted the police to report him missing. Searches took place and CCTV footage of Edward from the day that he disappeared was located. That morning, he had visited Lloyd's bank. It's not known whether he took any money out or had visited the bank for some other reason, but it did mean that the police had a last known image of him to share in appeals for information. Edward was also sighted later that same day, walking along the A167 near the Red Lion pub. He was alone when he was spotted. Searches of the surrounding areas turned up no new clues, and police began to believe Edward had met with foul play. Over the years, underwater searches of nearby ponds and lakes took place, as well as searches of abandoned mine shafts and even an old World War II air raid shelter. Each time, the family hoped for closure, but nothing was ever found. In 2005, a number of people were arrested, including Edward's sister and his niece, but they were all released without charge. Since then, no new information has been brought forward, but police believe someone in the local community knows what happened to this missing person. Edward was 5 foot 8 inches when he disappeared, pale with mousy brown hair. Anybody with information should contact Durham Police or Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Nathan Cole disappeared while on a night out in northeast London. For more than 2 weeks, his family has been searching for answers about what happened after he last appeared on CCTV footage. Nathan is described as an extremely outgoing and sociable person, so it wasn't unusual when he made plans to go see friends in London on the evening of January 21st, 2023. But his friends canceled at the last minute, leaving Nathan looking for something to do. At 9:30 p.m., he sent a message to his brother to let him know that he was going to a gig in Camden, but it seemed like his plans changed after that. It was normal for Nathan to spend the night away from home, but when his parents couldn't contact him the next day, they reported him missing. Police were able to trace much of Nathan's evening via CCTV footage, but it didn't make it any clearer what had happened to the 32-year-old. The first CCTV footage of Nathan released by police was taken at 10:05 p.m. when he bought a 4-pack of beer. Nathan was next seen boarding a bus, but it was heading in the wrong direction for the Camden gig that he planned to attend. Nathan got off the bus at 10:55 p.m. outside Walthamstow Academy, But if this was simply a case of getting the wrong bus, Nathan decided against crossing the road and catching the one heading in the opposite direction. Instead, he took a walk through a residential area. He was twice captured on residential CCTV cameras. Police released footage of Nathan walking along Billet Road, then later footage on Banbury Road. He'd left the sights of the CCTV cameras at 11:17 p.m. At the time, he was walking in the direction of the River Lee. Nathan didn't seem to be in any rush in the CCTV footage, but he seemed to know where he was heading and wasn't simply wandering around. While this was the last CCTV footage of him, his phone was active at 45 minutes past midnight near their former IKEA store, which was located on the other side of the river. Police cannot say whether Nathan was in possession of the phone at the time. Nathan's phone hasn't been located, and there have been no new clues as to what happened after he left Banbury Road. Anybody with information in this case is asked to contact the Met Police. Nicola Payne's eerie disappearance has baffled investigators for more than 30 years, but her family is still no closer to getting the answers in this strange missing person case. Nicola left the home that she shared with her boyfriend to walk the short distance to her parents' house. She walked into the fog on December 14, 1991, and has never been seen again. Nicola and her boyfriend Jason lived in Coventry, England, with their 7-month-old son Owen. Nicola's parents lived about a half-mile away. The walk would have taken about 6 minutes across a patch of wasteland, locally known as the Black Pad. Today, the area is mostly grassland, with goalposts for local children to play football, and the well-marked paths shaded by trees. On the day of her disappearance, the fog was exceptionally heavy, and she wouldn't have gotten too far from her home before Jason was unable to see her. About an hour and a half after she left her home, Nicola's father went out to search for her. No trace of Nicola could be found. When Nicola's family couldn't solve the case, the police were called. A reconstruction of her mysterious disappearance was shown on TV about a week later, but it didn't lead to any tips that would solve the case. For the first few years, police and Nicola's family made appeals for information. Local parks and canals were searched. Tips would lead police to different parts of the city and the surrounding areas, searching for clues as to what might have happened to her. 7 years after Nicola's baffling disappearance, her family admitted it was unlikely she would have been found alive, but they were still dedicated to finding her. Over the years, multiple people have been arrested. In 2007, a 37-year-old man was arrested for abducting and taking Nicola's life, but he was later released without charge. A few years later, 2 more men were arrested. This came after appeals for information about 2 men seen in the area around the time Nicola vanished. The men were tried for taking Nicola's life, but found not guilty in court. Since then, tips have continued to come in and searches have taken place. Many have pointed to Nicola being in one of the canals in or around Coventry, but underwater teams still haven't had any success in their searches. Police believe someone in the community knows what happened to Nicola 31 years ago. There's currently a £100,000 reward for information leading to her being found. Tips can be sent to the West Midlands Police on 101 or through Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. 20 years have passed since Craig Heatherington vanished without a trace while on a night out in Middlesbrough. In that time, there have been no clues in his mysterious disappearance. Craig was just 22 years old when he vanished in the early morning hours of February 22, 2003. He was a student at Teesside University studying engineering. The day before his unexplained disappearance was like any other. He went to the university campus to hand in an assignment, then returned to the home that he shared with his mother, Sandra, and stepfather. He told his mother that he was going out with friends, but asked her to put some dinner on a plate for him to have when he got back. The next morning, the food had been left untouched. Sandra was unable to get in touch with him, and when she hadn't heard from him by Monday morning, she contacted the police. Police traced Craig's last known movements before he vanished into thin air. He had gone to the Corner House nightclub under Middlesbrough railway station. At about 1 a.m., he left his friends to go and get a taxi. He was last seen walking towards the River Tees. It appeared that he never caught a taxi, or at least not one that took him home. Craig hasn't been seen or heard from since. Police visited other clubs and businesses in the area, but there was no sign of Craig on any CCTV. It's not specified what condition Craig was in when he left the club, though it seems likely he'd been drinking. The area was close to the River Tees, and even though no camera footage was found of him walking towards the river, a tragic accident seemed like the likely solution to this strange mystery. Searching along the banks of the river turned up no clues. Early on in the investigation, there was hope the case might have a happy solution. A woman reported seeing a person who matched Craig's description, but police and Craig's family confirmed it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, 4 years after Craig vanished, another potential lead was spotted. During a news report on flooding in Leeds, 3 men were seen wading through waist-deep water in the background of the shot. According to Sandra, one of the men drew a striking resemblance to her son. The lead was taken seriously by police, and they appealed for the men to come forward. 16 years on, those men have never been identified. Craig's family continues to hope that they'll get answers to this strange mystery. He's described as being 6 foot 2 inches tall when he vanished and has blue eyes. He had small scars on the side of his left eye and his forehead. Anybody with information is asked to contact the Cleveland Police on 101 or Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Justine P vanished under suspicious circumstances in 2017. Despite police believing foul play was involved in this missing person case, there's been little coverage of this strange disappearance. Justine was a 34-year-old mother of 2 living in Miami. She worked at an organization called Camelus House, dedicated to helping homeless people in the community and assisting those at risk of becoming homeless. It was a job Justine seemed suited to, as her family described her as a very caring individual. Justine had 2 children, the eldest of which was 12 years old when she vanished on November 5, 2017. Justine left her home near Northeast 118th Terrace and 14th Avenue, wearing a pink sweater, blue jeans, and sandals. She also had her cell phone with her, but left behind her purse and wallet. She told her son to lock the door after her and then left. When she didn't return home, Justine's family contacted the police. It was very odd for her to simply disappear without warning. She hadn't told anybody where she was going or even how long she intended to be away, though it seemed likely Justine had anticipated a short trip. Early in the investigation, police revealed that they believed foul play was involved in Justine's disappearance. Nobody who knew the missing person could believe that Justine would abandon her children. She didn't suffer from mental health problems or substance issues, and there didn't seem to be any simple answer to her disappearance. What evidence, if any, police had that foul play had taken place has never been revealed. Since then, no new information has been released, and Justine's case has received little coverage. Justine is described as being 5'8" and weighing 190 pounds when she vanished. Anybody with information in this case can contact Miami-Dade Police at 305-471-2400 or Crime Stoppers at 305-471-8477. It's rare when the police announce they believe a missing person could still be alive, especially decades after the missing person case began. But that's what happened in the mysterious disappearance of Peter Maguire. Peter was 21 years old at the time of his disappearance, living in Fife, Scotland. He had some health problems, including epilepsy and depression, though there's no information about what kind of impact that had on his life. The last time he was seen was January 27, 1993. He left his home in High Valley Field and was later seen leaving Carnegie Swimming Pool. There's little information available about the initial investigation, but a large-scale search took place. Shortly after he vanished, Peter's car was located near the Forth Road Bridge, which connects Edinburgh to Fife. The location would have been roughly 15 minutes from where Peter was last seen. There were no clues at the location that could have indicated where Peter went next. The case remained open despite the lack of information. and the case would remain cold for the next 23 years. Then, in November of 2016, police made a strange discovery. There was a man in the south of England using Peter's name and date of birth. The man was entered into a homeless shelter in Hastings. He'd been living rough in the area for a while. As well as using the missing person's name and date of birth, he allegedly had other information which police say indicated he had some knowledge of Peter's circumstances. Before police could arrive to interview the man, he had moved on. This Peter had a phone number that police tried to use to track him, but they were only met with dead ends. The police have never been able to locate the man or determine whether or not this was the actual missing Peter Maguire. But the possibility was strong enough that they issued statements stating there was a possibility that Peter might be safe and well. An age progression photo was released showing what Peter might look like in his late 40s. Police believe the man who showed up at the Hastings homeless shelter may have moved on to West London, but could be anywhere in the country. They've also stated that if Peter were able to contact the police to let them know he was alive and well, that they wouldn't reveal his whereabouts to anyone without his wishes. Anybody with information should contact the Dunfermline police station. Many of the creepiest missing person cases happen out of the blue, but that wasn't the case in the disappearance of Alexis Ware in January of 2022. Alexis was worried about her safety and told her mother she didn't think she would make it to her 30th birthday in March. Days later, she vanished. Alexis was a single mother of two living in Greenville, South Carolina at the time of her disappearance. She worked as a hairstylist but had ambitions of becoming a model. She had appointments set up for photo shoots to help her achieve that goal, and she was also planning to move to Atlanta to have a better life for her children. But when she visited her mother for the last weekend in January, she wasn't optimistic about the future at all. On the night of January 29th, she got extremely upset. She was then getting persistent calls from someone that she only referred to as the devil. It was then that she told her mother she didn't think she would see her 30th birthday, but she didn't explain why. The next day, Alexis returned home to her children. She had a video call with her mother at 3 p.m., and she said she was going to take a nap. She didn't share any plans for the rest of the day, but didn't look like she had plans to go out. That wouldn't be the case. At around 7 p.m., Alexis was seen on CCTV at a nearby gas station. She had arranged to meet the father of her youngest child to hand over the children. It's not clear if Alexis knew her ex-boyfriend would be there, as she usually met with a family member instead. Despite this, there didn't seem to be any issue, and the ex, T.J. Patterson, put the children in the back of his car. Patterson would later explain that they'd planned to travel to his mother's house in separate cars, and then she would go on to her mother's home. But as soon as they left the gas station, Alexis sped past Patterson's car and threw a red light. He tried to get in touch with her, and when she didn't answer, called Alexis's mother instead. Alexis's family was unable to get through to her. She was reported as a missing person the following day. Police discovered Alexis's car a few days later. It was located on a dirt road in a heavily wooded area of McCormick County. However, it hadn't been driven straight there, with security cameras picking up the vehicle at an apartment complex in Anderson, South Carolina, and then in Augusta, Georgia on the night of Alexis's strange disappearance. Alexis's phone, purse, and personal identification were found in her car. The black hair bonnet she'd been wearing when she met with her ex was also found on the ground beside the car. So far, there have been no clues as to what happened to her, but her family believes foul play is involved. Some have pointed the finger at Patterson. He has a criminal record and had allegedly been violent during their relationship. However, police ruled him out as an ankle monitor showed he went straight home after meeting with Alexis and didn't leave the house again. A year on, the case remains unsolved, though it's likely foul play is involved in this strange disappearance. There's a $5,000 reward offered by Alexis's family for information leading to her. Anybody with information can contact Anderson County Sheriff's Office at 864-260-4405. 31-year-old Lloyd Raymond Gilsdorf Jr. was last seen at the downtown bus station in Pensacola, Florida on July 29, 1984. Lloyd had recently gotten divorced and was feeling rather down on his luck. Sometime in late July, Lloyd received a phone call that would change his life. A mysterious voice on the other end of the phone told Lloyd that he had a job going at an oil company in Houston, Texas. Lloyd jumped at the chance to work for an oil company and immediately accepted the offer. On July 29th, he called his parents to let them know that he would be moving away for a while for his new job. He also told them that he'd received a prepaid bus ticket from Pensacola to New Orleans, Louisiana. From here, a representative from the company would collect him and take him to the job site. His parents were excited and supportive. Lloyd said goodbye to his parents and headed for downtown Pensacola. From here, he boarded his scheduled bus to New Orleans, but his parents never heard from him again. His parents were not too worried at first, believing that he was just getting settled into his new position. But when months passed without any contact, they knew something was wrong. Lloyd's mother sent a prepaid bus ticket to the mysterious man in Houston, but the ticket was returned days later as the letter was deemed undeliverable. It was at this point that Lloyd's parents knew something had gone terribly wrong. In January of 1985, Lloyd was finally reported missing to the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. There had been multiple attempts to track down the mysterious man in Houston, but so far, these leads had been fruitless. Lloyd's parents believed that he was intentionally lured to a Pensacola bus station, but the question is, by who? He'd recently gone through a divorce, but his parents couldn't think of anyone that would want to harm him. 2023 marks the 39th anniversary of his disappearance. If still alive today, Lloyd would be 70 years old. Lloyd Raymond Gilsdorf Jr. is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, 5'6" to 5'7" and 160 to 165 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact James Lee of the Escambia County Sheriff's Office at 850-436-9651, quoting case number 84017-018. 25-year-old Aaron Cody Forner was last seen on February 21, 2022, at his home in Sylva, North Carolina. Aaron's parents reported that he was living in a trailer at the family home in the 100 block of Fox Trace Road. Aaron had been battling alcoholism and was trying his best to stay sober. Shortly before his disappearance, Aaron had begun exhibiting symptoms of extreme paranoia. He was convinced that someone or something was out to get him. Between 1 and 2 a.m., he called his grandparents, who also lived on the property. Aaron mumbled his words in these calls and was talking strange. The reception was intermittent, and he often got cut off due to bad cell reception. His last known sighting was around 2:30 a.m., and after that, he vanished. Following these bizarre calls, his sister, Courtney K. Biddix, went to Aaron's trailer to try to calm him down, but there was no sign of him. When she entered the trailer, she noticed that all the lights were on, and Aaron had left his electric blanket on too. She also described seeing the state of the trailer as being ransacked. However, Aaron's bag, wallet, keys, and phone charger were all left behind in the trailer. Just meters from the trailer, Courtney found her brother's hat, which he rarely left the house without. An immense wave of panic washed over the Fortners, and in the wee hours of February 21st, 2022, they contacted the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and reported him missing. Officers were immediately dispatched to the scene and began what they described as a boots-on-the-ground operation. The family home on Fox Trace Road is around 3 square miles from the Great Smoky Mountains, and investigators began to focus their efforts there. By February 26, 2022, the boots-on-the-ground operation had been called off after investigators failed to find any sign of Aaron. Over 100 volunteers, fire departments, search and rescue teams, and a swift water team turned out in the search for Aaron. Courtney, Aaron's sister, told the media that they don't believe he ran away. His mother, Christina Biddix, wrote a heartfelt Facebook post saying, quote, "If it takes the rest of my life, I will look for you till my last breath. I ask God to take me and bring my son home. I've experienced pain in my life, and I thought I couldn't break, but this is breaking me." Aaron Cody Fortner is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, 5'7" to 5'9", and 130 to 140 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Special Agent Shannon Ash of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation at 828-330-4678, quoting case number 2022-00606. 22-year-old Tawny Marie Turner was described as having a magnetic personality. Tawny was well known in the Pittsburgh art scene, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who didn't like her. Tawny could often be found teaching a ceramics class or at a local concert when not working as a fabricator. Tawny's zest for life and creative abilities made her stand out. When Tawny disappeared without a trace, the artistic community of Pittsburgh came together to find one of their own. On December 30th, 2019, Tawny spent the afternoon at the Dobra Tea Shop, one of Tawny's local haunts. At around 6 p.m., Tawny left the tea shop and headed for a bus stop. She lived in an apartment in Hazelwood, around 4 miles from the tea shop, in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood. A bus driver saw Tawny that evening, waiting for a bus at her regular stop at Hazelwood Avenue and Giddings Street. From there, Tawny had a short walk to her home but never made it. While Tawny was making her way home, she was on the phone with her sister, and there was no indication that anything was wrong. When Tawny failed to return home and contact her family, they panicked. On December 31st, 2019, Tawny's family received a call from a firefighter who had found Tawny's purse, shoes, wallet, and phone, and a ceramic pot. This anonymous man told Tawny's family that he was walking across the Homestead Grays Bridge at around 8:30 p.m. on December 30th when he saw her belongings on the side of the road. He had contacted her family, hoping to return the items, but this call only confirmed the worst. Tawny's family promptly reported her missing to the Pittsburgh Police Department, and a search was underway. Investigators speculated that Tawny might have walked down Interstate 80 to get home. There was no sign of a struggle or what may have happened to Tawny on the bridge. The communities of Pittsburgh rallied behind Tawny's family. Murals were made in her honor, and dozens of volunteers turned out to hand out leaflets and garner media attention. There have been a few leads in Tawny's case, but according to the Pittsburgh Police Department, none have panned out. December of 2023 will mark the 4th anniversary of Tawny's disappearance, and her family is desperate to find out what happened to her. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Julie Ott of the Pittsburgh Police Department at 412-323-7800, quoting case number 19-264-396. 34-year-old Maria Nina Miller moved from her native Philippines to the US in the early 2000s. By 2005, she had met and married Kenneth Miller, a US Army recruiter. Kenneth's work meant that he traveled around Virginia a lot, leaving Maria at her home in Norfolk, Virginia. In 2010, Kenneth was transferred to Towanda, Pennsylvania, over 440 miles away. Maria stayed by his side and was slowly beginning to settle into her new life. Just a year later, she would disappear under bizarre circumstances. Maria was last seen on February 4th, 2011, at the Dandy Mini Mart where she worked. Those who worked with Maria described her as a gentle, kind woman who was devoted to her son. She would call her son to ensure he was okay when she worked the evening shifts. On February 4th, she told her bosses that she would be taking 2 days off as Kenneth's mother was in a Charleston, West Virginia hospital. She planned to return to work by February 7th, but was never seen or heard from again. A missing person report was not filed until June of that year. According to the Charlie Project, it was not Kenneth that filed the report, but the Army. When approached by Pennsylvania state troopers, Kenneth claimed that while in the car park in Charleston Medical Center, where his mother was, the two got into an argument. During the argument, Maria demanded Kenneth take her to Virginia Beach, and Kenneth obliged. Kenneth claims that the last time he saw his wife was when he dropped her off outside an apartment complex in Virginia Beach. Investigators began the search for Maria and were distrustful of Kenneth's accounts. Despite numerous searches, no sign of Maria has ever been found. Anyone with information is asked to contact Trooper Christopher King of the Pennsylvania State Police at 570-697-2000, quoting case number P05071 0879. 22-year-old Judith Lindel was last seen on March 8, 1976, just a half mile from her Silver Creek, New York home. On that breezy March afternoon, Judith had just finished up at the Anderson Lee Library and was heading to her home on Central Avenue. According to the Post-Journal, the distance between her home and the library was just a half mile, a walk that should have taken her around 15 minutes. Judith's parents and brother Danny anticipated her arrival, but sadly, Judith never made it home. Earlier that afternoon, Danny came across his sister while she was making a short walk home. He motioned for his sister to jump in the car with him, but she declined, saying she preferred walking. That snap decision changed their lives forever, and Judith was gone in an instant. When Danny arrived home, he waited for his sister to walk through the front door, but that didn't happen. When nightfall came, the family reported their daughter missing and began searching for her. Danny, Judith's brother, told the Post-Journal that in the wake of her disappearance, the family received multiple calls from people who claimed to have seen Judith. These sightings came from Erie, Buffalo, and across the state of New York. Unfortunately, these leads never panned out, and the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office is still none the wiser 47 years later. The Silver Creek Police Department is now incorporated with the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office, which adds further complexity to the case. In 2022, the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office announced that they'd uncovered a new lead in the case. The Unsolved Crimes Unit came across Judith's name while reading through the case file of an unrelated homicide. No further comments have been made regarding this lead. In February of 2023, the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office announced they were seeking information about a white GMC dump truck driven by a white man in his 20s with sandy hair. Judith's parents have since passed away, never knowing what happened to their only daughter. Judith's three brothers, Danny, John, and Henry, are left to carry the torch for their sister. Judith Lindel is described as a white female with brown hair, blue eyes, 5'11" and 130 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office at 716-753-4232, quoting case number 2218463. Julie Weflin disappeared and was likely kidnapped while working at a remote electrical substation in Spokane, Washington. 35 years later, authorities are still no closer to solving her mysterious disappearance. Julie was a 28-year-old power equipment technician at the Bonneville Power Administration. It was a role that few women worked in, especially in the 1980s, but there are no reports of Julie having any problems in either her professional or personal life. September 16, 1987, was the day of Julie's disappearance. Her husband Mike was out of town that day. He was a professional house painter and was working 50 miles away on that fateful day. Julie's morning proceeded as normal, but at around 2 p.m., there was a report that nitrogen was low at one of the transformer substations. This wasn't part of Julie's routine, but nothing she hadn't done before. She hopped into her work truck and drove the 15 miles north to the Spring Hill Station near Riverside State Park. It was a relatively remote area with plenty of woods nearby. Julie signed in at the substation at 2:30 p.m. and got to work. What happened next remains an unsolved mystery. It would have taken Julie about an hour to complete the work she needed to do. As the work itself was completed, it's assumed she'd finished up and was making her way back to her truck when she was attacked. Julie never made it back, and it would be hours before she was reported missing. A neighbor noticed her truck abandoned beside the substation at about 9 p.m. Her hard hat and sunglasses were in the gravel beside the truck. When police were called, they identified indentions in the gravel that indicated someone had dug their heels in to stop themselves from being dragged. There was also a mark on the truck that suggested someone had fallen into it. Fresh tire tracks from another vehicle other than Julie's were located at the scene. Searches took place right away, and it's believed Julie had been kidnapped by two people, and at first there was hope that she was still alive. Mike Weflin quit his job to dedicate time to finding his wife, and countless billboards with Julie's face on them popped up. Police received leads, but none of them led to Julie or her body. A man that lived nearby was a person of interest for a while. Multiple people had given his name to the police and he was interviewed twice. He also had connections to Deborah Swanson, another woman who went missing a year before Julie. He told reporters that he feared that the police were going to frame him for the crime and was allegedly uncooperative. The police eventually ruled him out. To this day, no suspect has ever been identified. Various serial killers who worked in the area were considered and ruled out. Julie's friends and coworkers have tried to keep the search for her alive over the years, and there's a reward for information that leads to the conviction of the criminal responsible for this mysterious missing person case. Anyone with information can contact the Spokane County Sheriff's Department at 509-456-2233. Those who knew Finn Creaney never expected he would disappear into the wilderness, a place that he seemed so at home. But in March of 2022, the survivalist YouTube creator disappeared without a trace in the Scottish Highlands. Finn had used his survival skills to make a career for himself. As well as a job as a survival instructor at Wildcat Bushcraft, he also had a YouTube channel showcasing his skills. He would often take cameras out into the highlands and film his adventures, making emergency shelters and showing viewers how to survive at sub-zero temperatures. When Finn left his home on March 25, 2022, there didn't seem to be any threat of sub-zero temperatures. It was an unusually warm early spring, and Finn wanted to make the most of the weather. He drove to the Gulspie Beach car park, where he left his car, then got a lift from a family member to a caravan park along the B873 road. Finn planned to hike around Loch Naver and then south to Gulspie. He had told his wife that he would be home by midday on Sunday, 2 days after he was dropped off, and he promised to help her make deliveries for her florist business. When Finn was dropped off, he seemed in good spirits. He was wearing a black t-shirt, a knee-length brown leather jacket, dark-colored pants, and brown boots. He was also carrying a green backpack. The last confirmed sighting of Finn was by that family member, who drove away at 2:15 p.m. Approximately 90 minutes later, it's believed he was spotted by some hikers, 3 miles away from where he was dropped off, still in good spirits. Finn's phone was already turned off at this point. It was later discovered that it was cut off at 1:47 p.m., though if this was Finn manually turning it off or if it ran out of battery is unknown. Finn's wife, Lucy, noticed that her messages weren't going through to him, which seemed unusual, but wasn't too much of a cause for concern. Finn didn't show up by midday on the Sunday as he had promised, but Lucy believed the hike must have just overrun. By that evening, she was beginning to worry, and when Finn didn't show up for work the next day, Lucy reported him as a missing person. Searches of the wilderness by land and air have taken place. At first, his family was certain that he would quickly be found, likely not even realizing there'd been any need for panic. But as weeks and months then passed, it became more and more clear that something terrible had happened. Poor weather at the end of 2022 meant that searches had to be called off, but Finn's family and friends have launched a crowdfunding campaign in the hopes that they can resume the search soon. Anybody with information on this case is asked to contact the police at 101. Sharon "Sherry" Anderson was very close to her family. In particular, she had 2 young grandsons that she adored. So when December rolled around, her mind was immediately on Christmas. Unfortunately for Sherry's family and friends, Christmas time is now a reminder of her unsolved disappearance. It was December 2nd, 2000 when Sherry was last seen. She left her home in Stanwood, Washington at 9 a.m. that morning. The night before, she had shared her plans for the day with her daughter. She was planning to go to McDonald's for breakfast, then collect some photos that she'd sent to be developed. She would then visit Walmart before stopping at the Everett Mall. When she left home, she promised her husband she would be back by 4:30 p.m., as they had plans to go out for dinner. Sherry's husband John fell asleep at some point that afternoon and woke at 5:30 p.m. to find Sherry still wasn't home. He called Sherry's friend thinking she might be there, but the friend hadn't seen or heard from her. After calling around to Sherry's other friends and family, a search began. At 9 p.m. that evening, a friend found Sherry's car outside the Everett Mall. There were no Christmas presents inside, so it seemed like whatever had happened to her had happened before she got back to the car. Sherry's purse and the weapon she used to protect herself were both found inside the car. To her family, it seemed impossible Sherry would have disappeared of her own accord. She worked as a social worker and was described as dependable. There's also been no activity on her bank account since her disappearance. Family and friends led the way in this investigation. They searched pawn shops for the jewelry Sherry was wearing when she vanished. In particular, she had a custom-designed wedding ring, a diamond flanked in black onyx set in white gold. There was no sign of the ring in any of the stores. There's been no trace of Sherry since her disappearance. John filed for a divorce a year after Sherry disappeared, stating that he needed to move on. The rest of the family has continued to search for answers. Sherry was 5'8" and 130 pounds when she vanished. She was a biracial Caucasian and Cherokee Native American and was last seen wearing a green jacket, blue jeans, and white shoes. Anyone with information in this case can contact the Everett Police Department at 425-257-8483. The disappearance of Colleen Paris started with a phone call. It was around 3 p.m. on September 30th, 2000. Colleen was a popular 18-year-old living in Plantation, Florida. She had a part-time job as a waitress, was taking evening lessons to get her high school diploma, and had future plans for herself and her boyfriend. According to everyone that knew her, Colleen was in a good place and had her whole life ahead of her. She was at home with her mother when the call came in. Her mother didn't know who it was on the phone, but the way Colleen was talking gave her mother the impression that it was just a friend. She then told her mother that she was going to Coral Springs for a few hours and would be home by 6 p.m. Her family had tickets to see the Florida Marlins baseball team that evening, and she didn't want to miss it. When Colleen left, her mother had no reason to believe her daughter wouldn't make the game. That evening, there was no sign of Colleen. When she missed the game, her parents weren't too worried. It was unlike her to not show up for events, but they assumed she just lost track of time while out with friends. But by the next day, it was clear something was wrong. After checking in with Colleen's friends, they discovered that nobody knew who had called Colleen on the day of her disappearance, and her whereabouts were unknown. The police were called, and they believed Colleen was simply out with friends and would be home soon. But thankfully, they decided to take the missing person case seriously anyway. Searches of the routes Colleen might have taken took place. Her family and friends handed out missing person flyers, and on October 6th, Colleen's car was found. The white Mazda was parked outside of Tamarack Square West Shopping Center, next to an abandoned fast food restaurant. Police believed the car had been there since the day of Colleen's disappearance, but the rain had washed away any fingerprint evidence that they may have gotten. Colleen's phone was still missing and still has never been found. No witnesses have ever come forward with sightings from after Colleen left her home that day. It's not known why she went to the shopping center. One friend with access to Colleen's voicemail claimed Colleen's uncle had left messages on her answering machine, reminding her to meet him at a shopping center in Coral Springs. The friend said that the messages had not been listened to and she deleted them. Colleen's uncle denied contacting Colleen on the day of her disappearance. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted, and hundreds of tips were sent in, but none led to Colleen being found. Colleen was 5'2" and weighed 95 pounds when she disappeared. She had multiple tattoos, including a large butterfly on the small of her back and Chinese characters on her right ankle. Anyone with information in this case should contact the Plantation Police Department at 954-797-2118. Emelda Keenan was last seen on January 3rd, 1994, walking to the post office near her home in Waterford City, Ireland. Since then, her family has been trying to solve this strange missing person case. Emelda was 22 years old and one of 10 siblings. She was living in Waterford City in the 1980s, following in the footsteps of two of her older brothers. She was studying a computer course at the Central Technical Institute and lived with her boyfriend, Mark Wall. According to Mark, Emelda had left their home at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd. She had told him she was going to collect a welfare check from the post office. The post office would have been closed though, as January 3rd was a bank holiday that year. But it's possible Emelda had simply lost track of the days during the festive period. A doctor's secretary driving down Lombard Street spotted Emelda 30 minutes later. According to the secretary, Emelda had stopped in the road to let her car pass, then continued on her journey. She rounded the corner of the Tower Hotel and was never seen or heard from again. One of Emelda's brothers reported her missing the following day. Her disappearance was very out of character, and when her family arrived at her apartment, they found most of her belongings had been left inside. Among those were her glasses, handbag, and cigarettes, items she likely would have taken for a trip to the post office. Police were now slow to act in this strange case, but it's now believed foul play was involved in Emelda's disappearance. No suspects have ever been named, but Emelda's family believes one or two people in the community know what happened to her. Her case has also unofficially been linked to the disappearance of other young women in Ireland in the 1990s, part of the so-called Irish Vanishing Triangle, but there doesn't seem to be anything linking Emelda's disappearance to any of the others. Emelda's family has continued to push for answers and hope to one day discover what really happened to their missing loved one. Anybody with information can contact Waterford Garda Station at 051 305 300. 54-year-old Stephen Clark was known as a loving and caring father. He lived with his family in Wareham, Dorset, England, and was well liked in the community. In recent years, Stephen has had a few setbacks regarding his health. He was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, a hereditary disease that slowly stops the brain from working. Stephen's family had noticed that the disease affected his memory and coordination and did everything they could to give him a happy and comfortable life. So they immediately began to panic when he disappeared in late January of 2023. On January 6, 2023, Stephen was going about his morning routine as usual. Witnesses recalled seeing him in a shop in Wareham at around 9 a.m. that morning. Other locals recalled seeing Stephen outside the Garden Gate Tea Room at around 10:30 a.m. When Stephen failed to return home, his family panicked and contacted the Dorset police. Given his various health conditions, the Dorset police jumped into action and began searching for Stephen. The Dorset police were able to retrieve CCTV footage of Stephen's last movements. It showed him walking down Bell's Orchard Lane at around 11:23 a.m. After this, Stephen mysteriously dropped off the map and has not been seen or heard from since. The local community has rallied behind Stephen's family, offering their support, and the Dorset police have teamed up with the Dorset Coast Guard and the RNLI, or the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. The Hampshire Search and Rescue Team and the Wessex 4x4 team have also offered their support and services. The Dorset police fear Stephen may have fallen into the River Frome or the River Piddle, and extensive searches of the two rivers have been conducted. Unfortunately, there's been no sign of Stephen, and his family has made several heartbreaking appeals for his safe return. The Dorset police are now considering appealing to motorists who were in Wareham on January 26th to check their dashcam footage for any possible clues. Over 400 homes and properties have been searched in the endeavor to find Stephen, but clues are yet to surface. 54-year-old Stephen Clark is described as a white male with brown hair, 5'10" of a slim build, and using a golden walking stick. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Dorset Police on 101, quoting case number 5523-001-4390. 40-year-old Andrew Spencer was last seen in his hometown of Bradford, England on January 9, 2023. Unfortunately, Andrew's disappearance has garnered little attention, and the only outlets covering his disappearance are local newspapers. According to reports, Andrew was captured on CCTV on South Street at around 3:03 p.m. on January 9th. After this, he's never been seen or heard from again. His family said that while they did not see each other much, Andrew always kept in touch via text and phone calls. So when these calls stopped on January 9th, his family became suspicious. Andrew's disappearance was not reported until January 25th, when he had failed to contact his family for several weeks. The West Yorkshire Police were notified of Andrew's disappearance and have been investigating ever since. The only clue Andrew left behind was his CCTV footage on South Street. According to reports, there's been no activity on his bank cards or social media since he disappeared. He's known as a fixture in the local community, and there have been several media appeals by his family since he disappeared. His sister told the Yorkshire Examiner, quote, "We're starting to think the worst has happened to him. We're hoping for a good result, so please keep sharing his face." Andrew may have traveled to Scarborough, around 84 miles from his hometown. Police are also concerned for Andrew as he didn't take his medication with him, nor has he collected his medication since January 9th. The West Yorkshire Police are continuing to investigate Andrew's disappearance. However, with no clues to work on, they've quickly found themselves at a dead end. 40-year-old Andrew Spencer is described as a white male with gray hair, brown eyes, and around 6 foot. He was last seen on South Street on January 9th, 2023. Anyone with information is asked to contact the West Yorkshire Police at 101, quoting 1202, January 25th. In 1985, Rachel Thomas married William Gregory Thomas, the man she considered to be the love of her life. The two welcomed a child into the world shortly after. However, the marriage was not to be. According to court documents, in January of 1991, a now 25-year-old Rachel divorced William, and the two began planning custody arrangements for their child. Just months after the divorce was finalized, Rachel would vanish, leaving behind many unanswered questions. At 9 p.m. on September 12, 1991, Wendy Robinson looked at her phone, waiting for it to ring. She'd agreed to have a call with her friend Rachel Thomas at 9 p.m. that evening, and it was out of character for Rachel to have forgotten about their plans. Wendy wasn't the only one who sensed something was off. At around 8 p.m., Arlene Kolokar, Rachel's roommate, arrived back at their Jacksonville, Florida home and noticed the lights were on. When she entered the garage, she noticed that Rachel's car was missing, but the door to the garage had been left open. Arlene also noticed scuff and drag marks on the walls in the hallway and immediately sensed something was off. She called around to Rachel's friends and family, but it quickly became apparent that no one had seen or heard from her that evening. Rachel's mother contacted the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office the following day after failing to locate her daughter. When the Sheriff's Department arrived, they immediately noticed several disturbing clues. As laid out in court documents, the Sheriff's Department discovered footprints on the garage floor, scuff marks on the wall, and dents in the air conditioning system that was covered with a red fluid. Rachel's mother explained to the sheriff that her daughter had recently gotten divorced and was going through a custody battle with her estranged husband. It was also discovered that William had begun dating another woman while he was still married to Rachel. The sheriff's office immediately wanted to speak to William, and he gave the police a few red herrings. When initially questioned, he told officers that he'd last talked to Rachel on September 13th at around 5 p.m. According to William, Rachel had asked him to come around to drop off some of her belongings. However, when he arrived at her house at 5:45, there was no answer, so he left the boxes at the front door. Investigators were suspicious of William's alibi, and even more so because his girlfriend was the one to back him up. Just days after Rachel disappeared, investigators found her abandoned gray 1987 Honda Civic. According to court records, the car had recently been cleaned, and the only print obtained from the vehicle was William's palm print. The red smears found in the home were confirmed to be type B, the same as Rachel's. Without solid evidence or a confession, the sheriff's office was powerless until an unlikely witness came forward in September of 1992. David Shroud had met William while working at Publix, and the two had bonded over their failing marriages and impending divorces. David told investigators that William had asked him to help him kidnap Rachel and force her to sign papers related to properties that they owned and the custody of their son, Bernie. Court records obtained from William's trial indicate that on September 12, 1991, William and David turned up at Rachel's house under the guise of giving her her belongings back. Once inside, William attacked Rachel and ordered David to tie her up with duct tape. During the ensuing struggle, William continued to hit Rachel before putting her body into the back of her 1987 Honda Civic. The court documents don't detail what happened next or where William disposed of Rachel. David told investigators it took him a year to come forward, as William had threatened his life. William claimed that his birth parents were part of the mafia and that he had powerful connections. William was arrested and charged with Rachel's disappearance after David's testimony. Around the same time, William was arrested and charged with a similar crime, only this time the victim was his adoptive mother. William was found guilty in both cases, and he was sentenced to capital punishment for Rachel's disappearance. He's made several appeals over the years, but these have been unsuccessful. It's unknown what happened to Rachel after she was taken by William and David, with William stating that when he forced her into the back of her car, she was severely beaten but still alive. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at 904-630-0500, quoting case number 09487-989. 25-year-old Carolyn Elizabeth Lawson, also known as Carrie, was described as a sweet and caring young woman. Carrie had grown up in Cleveland, Tennessee, and later attended the University of Alabama Law School, where she obtained her degree. By mid-1991, Carrie had just received the news that she'd passed the Tennessee bar exam and had been granted her license to practice. She had also recently gotten her first job at a Jasper law firm and was looking forward to the future. Unfortunately for Carrie's family, a chance phone call would turn their world upside down. Carrie and her husband Earl, who also worked as an attorney, received a panicked call at 3 a.m. on September 11, 1991. Carrie groggily answered the phone only to be told by the caller that they were a nurse at the local hospital and that one of their family members was in, quote, a bad way, and that the two needed to get there as soon as possible. The call sent shivers running down Carrie's spine, and she quickly woke her husband, telling him the bad news. As the two left their home and ran to get into their car, they were ambushed by a man holding a weapon. The masked offender told Carrie to tie her husband up, and Earl watched on as the man bundled Carrie into her 1991 Ford Explorer and drove away into the night. Earl managed to free himself and called for help, but it was too late. The Walker County Sheriff's Office immediately jumped into action and began their search for Carrie. A week after Carrie had been abducted, her 1991 Explorer was found abandoned in a wooded area of Winston County, Alabama. There was no sign of Carrie with the car. On September 12, 1991, the phone rang at the Lawson household and it was Carrie. She spoke with Eddie, sounding panicked and scared. She told Eddie that her captors were demanding a $300,000 ransom. Special instructions on where to leave the money were provided, and her family began scraping together the money. Investigators quickly discovered two suspects, Jerry Bland and Karen McPherson, both cousins. Unfortunately, Jerry is no longer alive and has taken his secrets to the grave. According to reports, Karen admitted to helping Jerry kidnap Carrie for the ransom, but she told investigators that she didn't know where Carrie's body was. Some of the money dropped off at the particular location was found in Jerry's home, and Karen McPherson was sentenced to life in prison. According to Alabama News, Carrie's family met with Karen to allow her to tell them everything she knew. In 1993, Carrie was legally declared deceased in absence, with Earl and her family still desperately trying to find out what happened to her. Anyone with information is asked to contact Lieutenant Mike Dozier of the Jasper Police Department at 205-221-6790, quoting case number 0911-9109, or the Alabama Attorney General's Office at 334-242-7300, quoting case number 30609-001. 22-year-old Daniel Charles Edmonds exhibited bizarre behavior in the hours before his disappearance. His father, Charles Edmonds, told ABC4, quote, "He kept eyeing the neighbor's mountain bike. He was worried about people coming after him. I'm not sure if it was dangerous people or in his own mind." On the evening of August 22nd, 1995, Danny grabbed the neighbor's bike that he'd been eyeing and fled his home in Salem, Utah. After this bizarre incident, Daniel, also known as Dan or Dano, has never been seen or heard from again. When he failed to return home the following day, his family contacted the Salem Police Department and reported him missing. According to his father, Charles, a wide-scale search of the area was performed, including an examination of the Santacan Canyon and the Diamond Fort Canyon. During this search, investigators found Daniel's Ford Bronco about 7 miles from the mouth of the Santigan Canyon. Inside the car was a sleeping bag and hiking equipment, but there was no sign of Daniel or the stolen bike. Daniel's case baffles investigators, and his family is desperate for answers. Daniel Charles Edmonds Jr., who may go by Charles Daniel, is described as a white male with blonde hair, blue eyes, 6'4" and 140 to 160 pounds. He has a mole on his neck, a scar on his right finger, scars on his knees, a previous fracture to his left arm, and no tonsils. He was last seen wearing a blue Marlboro shirt, a green jacket with tan sleeves, blue Levi jeans, a brown belt, a white baseball hat, and high TEC boots. Daniel also suffers from undisclosed medical issues. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Salem Police Department at 801-423-2770, quoting case number 958682. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.